Hello and welcome to this BSI webinar, Navigating Fenestration Regulations and Standards, Transition Plans and Key Timelines. Our presenters today are Lorraine Bolsch, Team Leader, Pete Saddington, Sales Manager for Product Certification, and Jamie Webb, who's our Global Head of Certification for Quality and Digital Trust. So we welcome your questions today, and you can ask questions throughout the webinar through the question box in your control panel. There'll also be a Q&A session near the end of the webinar. So now for a brief overview of our presenters today. So Lorraine is the team leader for our fenestration certification team, having previously been the lead scheme manager for our fenestration customers, building up 25 years of experience. Pete is the sales manager for product certification, focused on our quality and digital trust domains. Previous experience as a senior business development manager working with businesses nationally. Jamie is the global head of certification for quality and digital trust with previous experience as a client manager and customer of BSI, having worked for a national door fabricator and hardware suppliers. So after the webinar, you will receive a link with access to the recording and slides, which will come directly from GoToWebinar within the next 48 hours. So please look out for this email. So I'd like to thank you for your participation. I'll now hand over to Pete, and we hope you enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. Hi everyone, good to be speaking to you today. We've got quite a full agenda, so we're going to go at a fair pace, but as Natalie said, please do add some questions if you've got them. If we do have time at the end, we'll answer them. If for whatever reason we don't get a chance to answer them on the call, we will look to get an answer back to you, or at least an acknowledgement before the end of the day, when we'll get some answers to you. So as Natalie said, we're going to go through a few topics today. We're going to start with the changes to regulatory marking across the entirety of the UK. What's the latest been happening there? We're also going to discuss the changes to BS 7412, and we're also going to go through the latest changes to PAS 24 with the addition of the Annex A1 2024. With both of these sections, we're going to discuss in a little detail how we're going to address the transition process and what that means for you guys as customers. And how we'll go through that from there. We're also going to touch on smart hardware because this is one of the topics that we're being asked an awful lot about. So we wanted to address this for our customer base first and foremost, let you know how you can avail of some of the newer options out there when it comes to hardware. And as I said, if we do get a chance at the end, we will go through some questions and answers. So as I said, do please pop them in the chat if they come up. But without further ado, we will crack on. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the recent changes to the UKCA or regulatory marking scenarios. So as of the 2nd of September, the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government website was updated to reflect a statement that the new government made in the Houses of Parliament regarding the future of CE and UKCA in the UK. Now, the headline of this is that while the government are committed to wide-ranging reform, they also recognise that there are competing priorities, and essentially I think they need to get to a stage where they are comfortable with what they're going to be putting in place long term. So what they've done is they have said that essentially CE marking is still going to be recognised in the UK indefinitely, and any further changes to that will carry a minimum of a 2-year transition period. Now, what that means for you as a system house, as a fabricator, a hardware company, it really does depend on your current method of compliance and the markets you sell into. And we've got a few examples here. Now, the caveat on this is that these examples, it's a non-exhaustive list. And while we can't consult, we can't tell you exactly how you can comply. What we can do is help point you in the right direction. So a few examples are, firstly, if your products are covered by either UKCA or CE marking, and you only sell into the UK, you can continue as you are. There is no need to change. If you have any discrepancies between your UKCA and CE marking certificates, you may need to align them if you want to just go down the route of maintaining one of those, or you can continue to maintain both. again, that is your decision. The third point to make here is that while the government hasn't explicitly said they're going to can UKCA marking, it could come back as a sole requirement in future, albeit subject to a 2-year notice period. So companies who currently UKCA and CE mark, you may want to do both, continue it. Again, it depends on the workload involved. It also depends on your personal circumstances. Another scenario is that if you only trade in the UK and you only have UKCA in place, you can continue to maintain that, and you'd only need to start CE marking if you were to place product on the market in the EU. Now, that does include the Republic of Ireland, and that takes me on to the next scenario, specifically for companies in Northern Ireland. UKCA still cannot be used in Northern Ireland, and you would have to use the CE UKNI mark for your local market. So, and that uses a UK notified body. So if you as a manufacturer produce in Northern Ireland and you use an EU notified body for CE marking, however, you can access both mainland UK, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland with one mark. So again, while we can't tell you what to do, there are ways that would be more efficient moving forwards as well. As we said, this ultimately gives you options to trade legally within the United Kingdom. You can do one or the other or both, and it depends on your individual circumstances. What we'd suggest moving forwards is at the end of this webinar, we'll share with you your local business development manager's details. You'd be more than welcome to get in touch with them for a more detailed conversation on your particular individual circumstances. Obviously, we can't address everyone's on the webinar today, but there are some other changes, specifically with 7412 and PAS 24, where marking becomes a little bit more important. It becomes a little bit more prevalent, if you like. So we're going to go through some of those changes now as well, and that may help steer you down one route or another, depending on what you need to do. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to pass on to Lorraine to go through the key changes to BS 7412. What I would say is there is a QR code there that you can scan, and you can get a list which takes you through all of the amends to BS 7412 from the last version. But I'll pass over to Lorraine to take you through the changes.
Morning, everybody. Thanks, Pete. Probably one of the key things that you've all noticed already from the changes to BS 7412 is that it's no longer just a requirement for window and door sets that are manufactured from profiles incorporating fusion welded corner joints. It has been recognised that there are more and more joints out there, mechanically, hybrid joints, timber look, all the rest that you all know all too well, that are now recognised in the standards. So whilst some of these were covered by your certificate scopes because we had relevant test evidence to back up their performance in accordance with the standard, that requirement hasn't changed. They still would be tested to 6375 parts 1, 2 and 3 as they always were, but it's now official. It's in 7413 and we can all sleep soundly at night now. Other changes to it also include a new subclause that's been added to the components section, which sets out the specification for use of thermal inserts that are designed to improve the thermal performance of your windows and doors. And the subclause that's been added that accepts that gaskets and weather strips can be inserted manually or pre-inserted or post-co-extruded as part of the extrusion process, as they always had the option to be. Hardware now is required to comply with the relevant part of EN 13126 series of standards. This is the built-in hardware for windows and door height windows. It's a new requirement, and in future, certification managers will look for suitable evidence when there's a request to add new hardware to scope certification. So this evidence is likely to be cascaded from your supply chain, such as your hardware manufacturers. The EN 13126 series of standards is actually in 19 parts. Part 1 covers general requirements, and then parts 2 to 19 cover most types of hardware used in the UK, which includes the handles, hinges, stays and locking systems. So as you can appreciate, your hardware suppliers are probably best situated to furnish you with that information to use in support of your extensions to scope as and when you're adding new products. And probably the best news for me, and actually I want to add a real whoop whoop here, is finally the BPF publication 355/1 has been removed from 7412. And the reason why I personally am so happy about this is because I do remember a time when there was test evidence in support of that standard that was always in draft form. And as the years have gone on, because I've been here far too long really, we've seen less and less test evidence for panels, and we've had to start removing them from scopes of certification. But now that that clause has been removed, it means anybody wanting to add a suitable panel to their window or door scopes can do so, providing they have the relevant testing in place, which will include PAS 24 guys. I won't be adding panels just purely for 7412 basis only, because I think it is a security rated product as well. So for kite marking, if there's a panel in a window, I'd like it to be on the PAS 24 scope rather than just the 7412. Manufacturing tolerances, there's been a new sentence added to the clause which allows different tolerances to those specified in the standard. So the 3mm work size and 4mm diagonally, where system designers shall be followed. So BSI will allow this where the certificate holder can provide suitable evidence from the system designer of the completed product. And then marking. So marking now has an awful lot, well, I say an awful, I don't mean awful. Marking now requires more detailed information for BS 7412. It isn't just about the number and the year of the standard. There's a new subclause which has been added that requires evidence showing that the product is also additionally marked with either UKCA, UKNI or CE marking as appropriate. Now, as you know, for the main part, System 3 is the level of attestation for all windows and doors. So it is the responsibility of the manufacturer placing the product on the market to have that product marked and to have a declaration of performance or a declaration of conformity in place for that product. So realistically, this requirement is no different to what you were already doing for your CE marking DOPs anyway, but it's now been formalised in 7412 as well. So the assessment team will be looking at this when they're coming in and doing your regular continuing assessment visits. So probably more of an issue for fabricators to be aware of, that it needs to be included. And I would just add to this one point, and I think I might be adding it in a bit early, but I'm sure you won't mind. Those of you that are providing trade frames only, you know already you have the power in your CE marking or UKCA marking to designate what type of glass is going in, because that will have been determined by the U value that you're putting on your mandated declaration. So if you know what glass is going in when it's in its fitted state, it shouldn't be an issue for you to put that on for your kite marking as well, because you're doing it already for CE. Which brings us nicely to PAS 24. So you're all no doubt well aware of the new methods of attack that have been identified with our lovely little Irks that go out and about with cans of compressed air and syringes of water and a bottle of super glue, as we all do obviously on a night out. But anyway, so now we have these methods of attack that are included into PAS 24, and we'll be looking at dealing with that as part of the audit testing process for any fabricators that have PAS 24 certification. On the door sets, we'll be covering the new methods of attack randomly on various samples during the 3-year process. So, but further details of that will follow in its entirety from me. Bear with me just a second, I just need a drink, drying up.
So what we're going to do with regards to the certification is we want to be as sensible as possible with this, because we do recognise the industry has had a recent transition, certainly within the last 2 years. Obviously, another one coming down the track within that time frame is unusual, but it is serious, and we do have to take that into account. So what we're going to look to do is, if you're planning any changes to your scope of certification in the coming months, and as we go through the rest of this webinar, things like 7412 changes, potential addition of new hardware, smart hardware, etc. These may be things to consider and discuss with us as well. If you are planning any changes to your scope of certification, then we will include the update to your certificates alongside any other works, and that wouldn't incur any extra charges other than the cost to extend your scope. If there's no other work required, an administration fee will be chargeable, but it will be less than we previously charged for this. The reason for this is that, again, it's an addition of an annex rather than a full update to the standard. And we do recognise that obviously everyone's gone through that fairly recently. So in terms of action required, adopting one of the combinations added in Annex 1 of 2024, and we'll go through those in the next couple of slides. So have a look at those and see which would be the best option for yourselves, and whether this can be adopted alongside any other works that you have planned, or whether it's needed sooner. So they're the actions that are required, really. But in terms of what was added in Annex 1 with regards to the options, you have a list here. Now, this webinar will be sent out to you as a recording, so please don't feel like you have to desperately screen grab these. They are in the new version of the standard, but if you don't get a chance to catch these now, they will go out on a recording. These are some of the options. Then you also get taken through some of the mechatronic cylinders. So again, smart hardware is an option. In addition to these, there is also the possibility of boxing clever and not having to replace huge stocks of hardware that you may have. Lorraine, did you want to touch on that bit?
Yeah, so basically the introduction of this new requirement and the change to TS007 will effectively mean that previously rated 3-star cylinders, if they can't pass the ICE test or the superglue test, will actually almost now become a 1-star cylinder. That doesn't mean that if you've got lots of stock of that you can't use it anymore. What it means is it can still be used, but it will need to be used with either a 2-star handle or a armor guard or some kind of cylinder guard like that, in order to bring it back into compliance to meet the minimum 3-star classification that's required for kite marking for PAS 24. So there's no need to scrap anything. So I don't want anyone worrying that everything that they've got is no longer used. It just might need a little bit of extra support, that's all, in order to continue to be used until you get the opportunity to buy in some new stock if you want to stick with the 3-star route that you were previously following for the cylinder on its own.
Yeah, and the way we're going to attack this, no pun intended, is that the requirements are going to be tested at the next annual product audit. Now, what we're saying is we're offering a transition. Now, it says 3 years in the presentation. We're unsure if it's 2 or 3 years at this stage. The reason for that is we're waiting for a steer from Secure by Design. We've heard informally that it could be 3 years, but we want to see that in writing first. So it could be between 2 and 3 years for the transition. So again, there's no need to do this at your next audit. What we would suggest is having that discussion with your business development manager. And again, at the end of this presentation, you'll have their details provided. And then we can decide and work with the scheme management team and the labs to get that planned in at a reasonable time for yourselves as a company. So we're not imposing that straight away. It can be a more gradual thing depending on where you are at in your readiness cycle, if you like. The other major change with PAS 24 is around the addition of clause 6.2. And I am going to read this part out, which says the manufacturer shall supply full instructions for assembly, installation, glazing, operation and maintenance with each door set and window. Now, what that means, it's quite innocuous in terms of what it says, but what it means could have a higher impact. And I am going to pass to Lorraine because she knows far more about it than I do.
So actually, I'm going to take this back a little bit. So let's, for argument's sake, say you're a fabricator who is going to be using a cylinder that is now a 1-star cylinder with either a 2-star handle or a security cowl. And then you're now telling us today, we're ready to transition to PAS 24, 2022 and A1 2024. Lovely, that's brilliant, but unfortunately, until we've actually assessed that the instructions that are required in PAS 24, the robust instructions, using their wording, are actually in place and available consistently for the products that you're manufacturing, we won't be able to transfer your certification. So again, this isn't something that you need to transition to immediately. It is going to be a little bit of a journey, but if you do feel that you're ready at your next continuous assessment for your assessor to confirm that you're in compliance with the Plus A1 2024, then please ensure that when they're looking at your marking, which they should be doing every visit, that they're also looking at your instructions so that they can confirm it on the report and point the cert team into the direction that you're ready to transition. And that's the best way to deal with that element.
Okay, and with regards to the additional marking, well, not marking requirements, the additional instructions. Now, this section can't be understated. It's going to have some real impact, especially if you're a trade manufacturer, because again, the onus is on you then to ensure that the products that then end up getting installed are going to be glazed correctly as well, especially if they're unglazed. So again, Lorraine, am I okay to?
So yeah, if you as a kite mark certificate holder are supplying product, you need to consider your supply chain. So if you're requested to submit a PAS 24 certified product through a third party, so for example a trade counter or just an installer that just wants the frame and wants to glaze it themselves, you have to ensure that that product remains compliant when the product is resold to the either another installer or into the homeowner or wherever it's going to. So you need to refer back to point 1, and the wording of the subclause for that makes the manufacturer responsible. And there's also a note in PAS 24 under that clause that says the instructions, as Pete's actually already touched on, but the actual wording is the instructions should indicate that installation is to be undertaken by a person suitably trained and qualified by knowledge, practical experience, and provided with the necessary instructions to enable the required tasks to be carried out correctly. So this is a new element that all manufacturers need to be aware of. It's not just a matter of we make the frames to a specification we're asked, and then they come and pick it up and take it, and that's the end of it. It isn't the end of it. Where your product goes and how it gets installed, you have a duty of care to ensure that you've done everything you can to ensure that it complies with the standard. None of the above excludes selling unglazed frames. So you can still sell your unglazed frames, but as a manufacturer of the frame, you need to think through carefully how you ensure that that product remains compliant, and you will need to demonstrate that as well. So it's not for BSI to prescribe the solution for this, but being involved in a number of trade association meetings, we do know processes are being worked on by manufacturers. So don't despair.
Yeah, and I think the key thing here is you can only be responsible for what you can be responsible for. If someone is going to deliberately go against your instructions, ultimately you can do as much as you can. So the consideration there, as I said, while we can't tell you exactly how to do it, you can put all necessary requirements in place, and then it's for other people to follow those as well. So the action required here is, again, similar to what it is for 7412, is updating your documentation to reflect those new requirements, and ensuring that those instructions are sent out with each door set and window. Quite how you do that is going to be for demonstration through the next door upcoming continuous assessment visit that you have. Okay, so thank you for that, Lorraine. We're gonna.
Could I just add one thing?
Of course.
Because we have got a number of fabricators that are on the line. We can see that you're all sat there. I know that none of you guys are deliberately making anything bad, and I don't want that to feel like this is the message we're giving. What these new changes, I believe, for PAS 24 and 7412 are doing is they're actually giving you more protection than you currently have, because you're already doing all of these things that it's asking you to do. You're just not documenting them at the moment, and that's probably all that's required, is that you need to just add some extra into your documentation.
We've just had a question come in on this topic from Colin, and he's asked, is the manufacturer in this instance defined as the system designer, i.e. the profile extruder, or the fabricator?
I would say the manufacturer is the fabricator. So the person that is taking the bar length of profile, welding them, pleating them, whatever they're doing to make them into squares, to actually then be placed on the market as either windows or doors.
Okay, hopefully that answers the question. So we'll move on to smart hardware. Now, this is something that me and specifically my team are being asked about an awful lot recently. So what we're seeing is the increasing adoption of smart hardware. So some of you will have seen recently companies like Kubu doing joint launches with both kite mark holders and just standard general fabricators as well. It's a point of differentiation, and one of the other questions we've had that we'll answer in a while is around sort of what are we seeing in the market. This is probably one of the things me and my team are being asked about the most, because it gives fabricators an option to differentiate their service with other people. We recognise that adding a new bit of hardware for every single time is, having to type test would be onerous, and maybe in some cases not cost effective, especially as this isn't going to necessarily be on every single window and door that you produce. Some cases it will be, but for things like smart locks, it may be a specified additional extra, for instance. What you may not know is that we are currently working with a number of hardware companies. So we've listed the companies there at the bottom. So ERA, Yale, Nuki, and Kubu all have approved hardware with BSI for addition to kite mark certificates. Now, if you are looking to add a smart option, we would encourage you to talk to these companies. And again, they will be more than happy to discuss this with you. A BSI Kitemark smart lock can be added to your scope without further testing. So on your certificates, we don't specify which 3-star cylinder you use. We just, I believe the wording is
that any combination of cylinder and hardware reaching a minimum of 3 stars for PAS 24.
There you go. Thank you. I wasn't throwing my voice, that was Lorraine. So we add generic wording around that so that you guys as fabricators, as systems, can chop and change. So you have the option there as well. We're going to do the same with smart hardware. So as long as a piece of hardware has been tested to ETSI EN 303645, which is the common standard. It's also the underlying standard of the UK's Product Security and Telecommunications Infrastructure Act, or PSTI, because the long one is hard to say 3 times fast. If it carries a certificate of conformity or a BSI Smart Lock Kite Mark, you can add that at no extra cost. What we will do is we will extend your scope to say approved smart hardware, and then we'll provide you with a list of the options there.
We also include the supplier's either Kite Mark certificate or certificate of conformity to demonstrate that it is valid onto your Kite Mark as well. It's just a nice audit trail to ensure that everything's up to date.
Yeah, so this will provide an ongoing trail of chain of custody, if you like, as well. So if it comes to NHBC, for instance, because we always hear of NHBC asking difficult questions, you'll be able to demonstrate that that smart hardware meets the requirements. So we'll have an updated list available. So if you do want to add any of the smart hardware options, I would encourage you to talk to those companies, as they all have options available. ERA, Yale and Nuki or Brissant all have a smart lock Kite Mark for their products and some of their supporting hardware. Kubu have a certificate of conformity for their smart sensors. These can all be added to your scope of certification as of today. In fact, they could have been added previously. So while we're looking at potentially extending your scope, additional works, if any of these do ring like they may be a good option for you, please speak to us, because it may be that we can roll in the updates to the certificates at the same time at no additional cost. So something to consider there.
And if in doubt, speak to one of your certification team first. So please, I can't stress this hardly enough, really. Anybody that tells you that it's fine because BSI have approved it, please don't take them at their word. Double check it with your cert manager, or me or Pete, and we'll be glad to check it out properly for you.
Okay, so that kind of wraps us up for most of the presentation today. Just to sort of conclude, and we will come on to some questions in a moment. In conclusion, consider your mandatory marking situation, your regulatory requirements, and your non-mandatory requirements. So whether you're UKCA marking, CE marking, or UKNI marking, if you're based in Northern Ireland, choose the right one for you moving forwards. And then also update your marking to BS 7412 2024 if you are a PVC fabricator. You may also want to consider any upcoming testing or certification changes. Obviously, as most of you know, we have had a slight delay with some of our testing in our labs. We are improving the situation. Our lead time is coming down dramatically, but it's still always better to have a conversation with us early doors rather than waiting to the last minute. So please engage with us, and what you will see moving forwards, when I introduce the wider team in a moment, we will be coming out to you to talk about this and to try and engage with you and help add some more value to your process. So please do consider if there's anything that you need or are going to need in the next 6, 12, 18 months, and we can start to plan that in and work with you on your timescales ahead of time rather than, you know, potentially having to rush last minute. So anything smart hardware wise, any other changes you're considering making, let's look if we can roll things up and try and make it a smarter project rather than doing things multiple times over and over again. And consider updates required to your quality management system as well. So as we've said, some of the marking changes, some of the requirements around instructions being passed on with the windows and doors, conduct the necessary updates to your quality management system to reflect that. They will be reviewed at your next continuous assessment visits. So if they aren't done in time for the next one, please make reference to it and say that they are in process, so the auditors are aware that this is going to be happening as well. Again, we want to try and make this more of a collaborative approach, and that involves obviously everyone working together pretty closely. So I'm just going to...
Can I just add one more thing?
Pass over to Lorraine.
I'm very sorry.
Quite all right.
That's goodbye from me. And good. No, I'm not really. I just wanted to add that fabricators will be more affected by this next comment that I'm going to make than the system houses. But as a result of what Peter's just said in conclusion about mandatory marking situation, that if marking for UKCACA or UKNI can't be evidenced during factory production control assessments, this will be raised as a major non-conformity. So have a look at Article 9 of the CPR. So the CE, UKCA or UKNI marking shall be affixed visibly, legibly and indelibly to the construction product or to a label attached to it. Where this is not possible or not warranted on account of the nature of the product, it shall be affixed to the packaging or on the accompanying documents. And with that in mind, you should also, if you are a kite mark certificate holder, be kite marking your products that are going out in accordance with PAS 24. So there's nothing stopping you having your CE mark and your kite mark on your physical product. But from a BSI point of view and from a your business point of view, the end user sees your kite mark as an indication that you're working with BSI. You all know you pay us a nice amount of money every year because you all tell me about it. So use it. Use the benefit of that logo that's been in circulation for over 150 years. Use it to your advantage to show the people that are buying your products that BSI are standing beside you, trusting that you're manufacturing everything that comes out consistently. That's it from me.
Okay. No worries. So just to sort of conclude, and like I said, we will get on to some questions in a moment. As I said at the start, we want you to talk to us, and moving into 2025, again, with a nod to us providing more value to you. My team are listed here. So if you're in the north, you are your business development manager is Adam Gruffity. If you're in Northern Ireland as well. If you're in the Midlands, Wales or the Republic of Ireland, it's Ben Williams. And if you're in the south, your business development manager is Mark Perry. These guys will be coming out to you to proactively set up meetings to discuss what your plans are for the next 6 to 12 months, how we can help you get more from your kite mark certification, and to gather your feedback. This webinar is very much designed to be the start of something. We want this to be the start of improved communication both ways. And my team are going to be absolutely critical to helping you and the scheme managers and the labs get in that as well. So we really want to make this the start of a conversation, and I would encourage you to take down the details for these guys, but also expect a call and an email in the next couple of weeks to try and set something up for the early part of the year. I think all that's left is to say thank you. Obviously, there's Lorraine's and my details. Some of you already got us on speed dial, I think, but you're more than welcome to take those down as well. So if you aren't getting an answer, or you struggle to get through to the guys, please do let us know. And I think we're going to move on to some questions now. Natalie, I think there's some questions we can't see, but there's been one other one since we read out Colin's from Mark, where he says.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want me to read? I'll read the one out from Mark to start with, no worries. So the question from Mark Jenkins is, sorry, we are looking at this process and thinking about using QR codes attached to the frame to link to our website for all the required instructions. Would this be acceptable, please?
So as you will have seen, Mark, from your latest copy of 7412, it does give you the choice of putting all the marking information on your website. So yes, it would be acceptable.
I think the only thing to consider is it would need to be for each product. So
Yeah.
if you have a tilt turn, for instance, that may have a slightly different U value, or
so you might
energy
have
rating.
different QR codes depending on the nature of the product that's going out and the style of glass that you're putting in it. Sizing might have an impact. So yeah, but so long as everything that's recognized from the link to that QR code is actually what it says. So one thing to be mindful of is we are aware that OPSS, and I can't remember what that stands for.
Office for Product Safety and Standards.
There you go, that's why we're such a good double act. Are making quite a few visits at the moment and causing quite a ruckus. So the only thing that I would say to you is, if in doubt, no performance declared. Obviously, you can't do that for the non-mandatory requirements. For the mandatory requirements, and do what you like for the non-mandatory requirements. But if you are declaring, especially for CE marking, if you're declaring a classification and your CE marking or UKCA marking, for CE, it has to have been tested to EN 14351 requirements by an approved body, and for UKCA, it has to have been tested to EN 14351 requirements by an notified body for CE, approved body for UKCA. There you go. Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse.
Body, a UK approved body.
A UK approved body for the NI.
There you go.
Okay, no, that's brilliant. Thank you, guys. We've just had another question come in actually from Colin. So let me just read that one out. So if labeling the product directly rather than accompanying packaging, does PAS 24 labeling supersede the need to show the 7412 kite mark?
No, if it's a PVC product, it will have to pick up the requirements in 7412 for marking, in addition to the requirements for PAS 24 for marking, which I appreciate makes it a very big label.
All right, brilliant. Is there anything else, Pete, you wanted to add there to that one?
Nothing from me. I would maybe just ask Jamie as well with some of the marking requirements. Is there anything that you wanted to add? I appreciate we haven't thrown to you.
That's fine.
Yeah.
The marking requirements, if they're in one of the standards that's in the scope of the certification, then they must be added to the product. So if you've got two standards referenced, you essentially need to cover both of those sets of requirements on the product if those standards mandate that they're on the product. So 7412 and PAS 24 both have marking requirements, so you would need to add both.
Okay, no, that's great. Brilliant answer. Thank you. Is there anything else anyone wants to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add on that the labeling requirements for the 7412 or PAS 24 is broadly the same. You need to have the logo, the date of manufacture. I think it's quarter and year. This is in the standards as well, so there is a guidance in there. But it also states that, like I said, the CE marking side of things is a regulatory requirement that is now listed in 7412 as a requirement there. So even though it's always been a requirement, you know, there have been people out there, not necessarily anyone on this webinar, because generally, if you go down the third-party certification route, you've got a pretty good handle on compliance. But there are fabricators out there in the marketplace who unfortunately still aren't CE marking products correctly, or UKCA marking or UKNI marking them correctly. So the one suggestion I would have, because we can't advise, is to check the standard to see what the marking requirements are as well, because that will have that in there. And in some cases it's really well laid out, in some cases it's a little bit vague, but that then gives you a little bit more opportunity to apply what's right for you guys as a business as well.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much for that, Pete. Okay, so we've got a few more questions that have come in. So I will start with the first one that we have. So going into 2025, what do BSI see as some of the challenges and opportunities the industry can expect to face, please? So who wants to take that one on?
I can start if you like. So again, that's quite a good question. I was recently at the Glazing Summit, and one of the first talks there did sort of go through this point quite well. So I'm trying to sort of rack my brains to remember what was said, but also sort of paraphrase it. Look, some of the challenges I think are well known. You know, the construction is in a tough place right now. We have got a new government who have said that they want to build X thousand new houses. You know, just like the old government said exactly the same thing. So there's no preference given there. That seems to be a reality. But how we get to that stage is obviously going to be difficult. I would say that there is an opportunity here because some of the regulations, you know, certainly some local authorities do specify third-party certification. So kite mark holders, third-party certification holders in this space do hold an advantage already. But I do think it's a case of giving customers more options. So the reason we added the smart hardware section here is because we've been asked about it, I would say in the last couple of months, probably about 10 or 15 times. Now that is roughly 10 or 15% of our fabricator kite mark base. So we're seeing a good chunk of people starting to ask about this. And it's really ramped up in that period of time. Previously, it was 2 or 3 people a month. Now it's a lot more people asking about this. So having those options available to end customers now, whether you are selling direct to Mr. and Mrs. Jones, whether you're selling to trade, or whether you're selling to new build house builders, there are benefits for them. And some of the other companies they'll be going out to for tenders may not have those options. So if there's anything we can do to support you, to help you shout about that, obviously we work with those approved smart hardware providers. There may be something that we can all work on together. So that would be something for us to discuss. In terms of other opportunities, I don't know if there's anything else you would say, Lorraine?
You put me on the spot now, haven't you? I can't think of anything else actually, because I think you've pretty much covered everything there. Have you got anything, Jamie?
Yeah, let me come in on something from a challenges perspective. So the question specifically says going into 2025. So I'm going to change the scope of that question a little bit. It's a longer term issue. Some of you, in fact, most of you, hopefully, might be aware that the current version of the CPR is being rewritten, has been rewritten, and there is now a ratified version of the construction products regulations in the EU, winding its way towards the official journal. When it becomes harmonised onto the official journal, what that will mean is a new regulation for construction products regulations. Okay. Now, the reason I'm saying this is don't panic when you see that if you haven't seen it already. Although the regulation changes at the end of this year, potentially if it appears on the OJ, or it may already be there, I haven't checked in the last couple of days. The next steps to that will be transition of standards, which is currently programmed by the EU to end in 2036, and it starts at the end of 2025. One of the first tranches of standards that will be reharmonised into later versions does include glass, windows and doors, in amongst other things. So we will be amongst the first to have to transition our CPR activity as well. This relates to CE marking, not at the moment to UKCA marking. In the UK, the current statutory instruments of law mandate you to work to the existing or outgoing version of the construction products regulations. I would love to be able to give you a clearer steer on what will happen to those statutory instruments, but at the moment, we don't know. We're asking MHCLG for some clarity on that. but it looks like for a period of time there will be 2 different versions of the regulation. So that's very definitely a challenge for BSI, as we provide CE marking from a notified body in the Netherlands and UKCA marking from the UK. It looks like that will be operated in parallel for a period of time until the transitions of harmonised standards occurs. So whilst it's not an immediate challenge for 2025, it's just something to keep an eye on and keep engaged with BSI, with other industry federations that you are engaged with, to ensure that you're aware when things are changing. So it's a longer term challenge, but it's just one to keep an eye on. That's all from me.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Jamie. Brilliant. I think that's a really good answer there to the question. So I think we've only got one more question that I can see that's come in. So this will be the last question from me, please. What trends do BSI see evolve in the industry, please?
I would say that, again, one of the things that we're starting to see is obviously with a nod to the future home standard, improved energy ratings, generally right across the board. So that's, you know, updated sort of profiles. We're starting to see more and more people look at that now. We are aware of some of the rollbacks that have been made there. So it may not be again for immediate, but that's going to be something that homeowners, people will start to ask for. And, you know, whether it's legislatively led or whether it is market led, it is coming. So improved energy ratings is always going to be one. And how people consume services as well, and how people will, you know, sort of buy product moving forward is starting to change again, with a bit of a nod to the session at the Glazing Summit. There was a fantastic talk by someone on, I can't remember the guy's name, and I apologise, but he was talking about AI marketing now. People will start to say, hey Google, hey Alexa, and apologise if you've got something in the background that I'm now talking to. You know, where can I buy new windows? This sort of thing is going to be the way that the market goes as, you know, sort of buying habits change. So one of the bits of advice that came out of that I thought was very useful was looking at how people's marketing adapts to being, you know, readable by Alexas, by, you know, the smart AI tools. That seemed to be quite a really sort of interesting point. I think there was a lot of people in the room. Some of those people are on the webinar as well. I think they'd agree that it was quite an eye-opening moment. So these sort of things are things to consider moving forwards as well as a sort of change, but that's one of the main ones for me. Lorraine has nothing. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Jamie?
No, I think just to summarise, you've got the way the marketing happens very definitely is changing. We're seeing AI models specifically written, large language model engineering specifically written to navigate buyers to sellers in a clever way without people being involved. So as Pete just said, keep an eye on that one. Energy ratings and the more general life cycle sustainability question is becoming more prevalent. So within the new EU CPR, there is a requirement for environmental product declarations within your CE marking. So obviously that's going to change some of the things that are occurring in the marketplace. You will need to declare your whole life cycle sustainability footprint of the product, not just carbon, but sustainability in general. And the obvious one that Pete talked about earlier, the slow but gaining increase in the noise around smart hardware and smart sensors around your products. If that gathers pace at the level of inquiry that BSI is receiving, then it would be clearly a good point to keep on the horizon for whether you need to address or have some smart hardware options within your portfolio of products, so that if a customer has seen it somewhere else and likes it but didn't like the door or the window, you're in a similar position to provide the same level of functionality for your products. So if we're seeing an increase in the inquiries about that work, stands to reason that it would be helpful if you guys were seeing an increase in your offering related to that work. So I think those three things for me are what's on the horizon for the next year or two. The CPR piece, maybe from 26 onwards.
Okay. There was just one other question which I did actually take offline before this, and I'm afraid I'm going to put Jamie on the spot with this one. If we can't answer it, I will get an answer for you. Unfortunately, Mark Barsby can't be with us today. He's otherwise engaged. One of the just with a nod to future standards being updated, Jamie, Mark had said that one of the 6375 standards are going to be updated in the next year or so. Do you know which one that is?
Not off the top of my head, Pete. I'm too far removed from that. Mark would be best placed to answer that. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to say, can we get back to somebody on that one?
That's
fine. Mark's back online tomorrow, so we'll ask him for that in the morning and get back to that.
So it was Neil 23 from Pontefract was the person asking that question.
Okay, we'll get back to.
So yeah, okay, but we'll get the answer back for that one shortly.
Brilliant. All right, I think it's probably about time that we wrap up the webinar. So I just want to say a really big thank you to you guys, to Pete, to Lorraine and to Jamie for all your time and effort with the presentations and for answering those questions. So thanks ever so much for that. And thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. So just so you know, once you leave the webinar, you will receive a short survey on your experience today. And we'd just be really grateful if you could just take a few minutes to complete this with your feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email within the next 48 hours, which will include the link to the recording and also the slides that you have seen today on the webinar. So lastly, on behalf of BSI, I'd just like to thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thanks.